The apartment cost more per month than her family's house in Nairobi was worth. Amina Ochieng knew this because she had done the calculation on the plane. Somewhere over the Indian Ocean, 30,000 feet above everything she had ever known, with a carry-on bag and a marriage certificate, and a decision she had made with both hands open. She had sat with the number for a long time. Then she had put her headphones in and watched the clouds and told herself that the life she was flying toward was temporary, practical, just business. She had believed that completely. For about 4 months. 8 months earlier, she'd been standing in a hospital corridor in Nairobi, holding a folder she had read so many times the edges had gone soft. The numbers inside it were not complicated. They were just impossible. Her father's treatment, ongoing, necessary, non-negotiable. The debt her family had been servicing for 3 years, inherited from a business that had not survived the pandemic and had taken everything with it when it went. The house, which the bank had been patient about for longer than patience usually lasted. Her 2 younger siblings, both still in school, both needing to stay there. She had done the mathematics 100 times. The mathematics kept returning the same answer. Something had to change, drastically, immediately. Her phone rang, an unknown number, a woman named Mrs. Han, Kenyan Korean, connected to enough people in enough places to have heard of Amina through professional circles. She had a proposition, she said, unusual, but potentially life-changing. Would Amina be willing to have a conversation? Amina looked at the folder in her hands. Yes, she said, I'm willing. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a new story. New videos every week, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next in this one. The meeting with Park Jae-won took place in a quiet hotel conference room in Nairobi, neutral ground which she appreciated. She had braced herself for arrogance, a wealthy man shopping for a convenient wife, comfortable in his own power, expecting gratitude. Instead, she found someone who seemed almost as uncomfortable with the arrangement as she was. He was direct. She gave him credit for that immediately. 2 years, he said. His company was navigating a major merger, the kind where optics mattered, where a settled personal life signaled stability to investors and board members who still believed such things indicated character. He needed a presentable, convincing wife for the duration. In return, her father's medical bills cleared in full, the family debt settled, the house secured, her siblings' education funded through completion. At the end of 2 years, a clean, quiet separation, and a personal settlement that would give her a foundation to build something entirely her own. No interference in each other's lives. No performance required beyond public appearances and basic cohabitation. Clean. Legal. Time limited. She asked for a week to think. That night, she called Sade. Sad had been her closest friend since university, the kind of friendship built in shared dormitory rooms and borrowed textbooks, and the specific intimacy of 2 people figuring out who they were at the same time. If there was anyone Amina trusted with the full truth of anything, it was Sada. She told her everything. Sad listened without interrupting, which meant she was taking it seriously. Then she asked the sharp questions. What if he's terrible to live with? What if his family is difficult? What happens if you catch feelings, Amina? What happens then? And Amina answered each one as honestly as she could. I won't catch feelings, she said. I know what this is. Saad was quiet for a moment. Then, if you've decided, I'm with you. Just be careful with yourself. Amina had already decided. She called Mrs. Han in the morning. The early weeks in Seoul were exactly what they had agreed. Polite, professional, 2 people sharing a large and well-appointed apartment with careful boundaries and minimal overlap. Jae-won left early and returned late. She learned the rhythms of his absence before she learned anything about his presence. The apartment was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful. Correct, considered, impersonal. She set about making one corner of it hers. She had always had a talent for spaces, for seeing what a room wanted to be and coaxing it there. In Nairobi, she had done it informally. Friends' apartments, her mother's sitting room, a small cafe whose owner had given her free rein and a minimal budget. In Seoul, with time on her hands in a city full of people with money and underdeveloped taste, she began to take small clients quietly, built a portfolio, started to feel for the first time since the hospital corridor, like herself. Jae-won noticed on a Tuesday evening. They were at dinner, the shared meal they maintained out of the social logic of the arrangement. And he looked up from his food and asked, without preamble, what software she used for her design renders. She told him. He nodded, said nothing else. The next morning, there was a laptop on the kitchen counter. Higher specification than anything she had ever owned. A note beneath it in his precise handwriting. For the work. She stood in the kitchen in her robe and stared at it for a long time. She told herself it was just part of the arrangement, keeping up appearances. A man like Jae-won would naturally want his wife to look established, occupied, successful. It was practical. It was nothing. She thought about the note the entire day. By month 4, the texture of their interactions had changed in ways she cataloged carefully and refused to interpret. He remembered how she took her coffee without being told twice. She learned that he went quiet under pressure rather than irritable, and that the correct response was not to ask questions, but simply to be present, to move through the apartment with her usual energy and let the normalcy of it do whatever it did for him. They developed a rhythm that had no name in the contract because the contract had not imagined it. There was a company dinner, the kind she attended as his wife, which she had learned to navigate with a particular combination of warmth and precision. A senior executive said something to her across the table, the mild contempt of a man who had decided she was decorative and felt comfortable demonstrating it. She was composing her response. She had several, calibrated to different levels of necessity. When Jae-won spoke first, Korean, quiet, brief. She didn't catch all of it. She caught enough to know it was not gentle. The executive's expression rearranged itself completely. On the drive home, she asked what he had said. That my wife has more professional accomplishment in one afternoon than that man has demonstrated in the entirety of his career, Jae-won said. Eyes on the road. Completely matter of fact, like it was simply the accurate thing and therefore the thing worth saying. She turned to look out the window. She did not want him to see her face. If this story is already pulling you in, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps more people find stories like this one. Now let's keep going. By month 8, she could not pretend anymore. She was not a woman who lied to herself. She had considered this a strength her entire life, the willingness to look at things directly, to call them what they were, to resist the comfortable softening of self-deception. It had served her well. It was serving her now in the specific, painful way that honesty served you when the truth was inconvenient. She was in love with her contract husband. The acknowledgement arrived not as a revelation, but as a settling. Like something she had already known, at a frequency below conscious thought had finally risen to the surface and stopped waiting for permission to be named. She sat with it for a full day before she called Saad. I told you, she said when Saad picked up. You asked what would happen if I caught feelings. A pause on the line. Amina. I know. He married you for a merger. I know, Saad. This was supposed to be. I know what it was supposed to be. Her voice was even. I'm not calling for a solution. I just needed to say it out loud to someone. Saad was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, there was something in her voice that Amina registered but did not examine, an edge that hadn't been there before, faint but present. Just don't forget what it actually is, Saad said. Don't let yourself get hurt. I'll try, Amina said. She hung up and sat at the window and watched Seoul move through the evening below her, and allowed herself, just for that one quiet hour, to feel the full weight of what she was carrying. Then she got up, made dinner, set the table for two. The contract was the contract. She knew that. She just wished it were enough. The messages started on a Thursday. Not dramatic at first, just numbers she didn't recognize. A text that said simply, "How's married life, Amina?" She stared at it for a moment, decided it was a wrong number, and put her phone face down on the desk. She had 3 client consultations that day, and a presentation to finish, and a husband who would be home at 7, expecting the version of her that had everything under control. She was very good at that version. The second message came 2 days later. Same number, different tone, must be comfortable. Big apartment, rich husband, everything worked out for you. She picked up the phone slowly, read it twice, felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the Seoul autumn outside the window. She called the number. It rang twice. Then Said picked up. The silence between them was enormous, the kind that had too much inside it to be accidental. Said. She kept her voice very careful, level, the way she kept her voice when something required her full attention. "What is this?" "Just checking in," Said said, lightly, too lightly. "That's not what this is." A pause. "You sound paranoid?" "I sound like someone who knows you," Amina said. "We've been friends for 6 years. Don't do that." Another pause, longer. Something shifted in Said's breathing, the lightness dropping away, something rawer underneath it. "I just think," she said carefully, "that certain people might find it interesting. The arrangement, the contract, Mrs. Hain, all of it." Amina sat down slowly. "Saad, I'm just saying." "Who?" Her voice was very quiet now. "Who would find it interesting? His family, maybe?" A beat. "The merger people." The word merger landed like something thrown, specific, deliberate. The kind of word you only used if you knew enough to use it. "Why?" Amina said. One word, genuinely asking. Not angry yet. She was past anger, already somewhere colder and more focused. "Tell me why." The line was quiet for so long she thought Said had hung up. Then, "You left." Her voice had changed completely now. The careful cruelty gone, something underneath it that sounded almost like grief. "You just packed up and left, and everything sorted itself out for you, and I'm still here, and nothing. Nothing is working, Amina. My job, the relationship, everything. And you're in Seoul in some beautiful apartment living some beautiful life, and you don't even..." She stopped, took a breath. "I just want you to know what it feels like. To have something threatened." Amina closed her eyes. She had known Said was struggling. She had sent money when she could, checked in when life allowed, told herself the distance was manageable. She had not seen this. She had not seen how deep it had gone, or how long it had been going, or what shape it had taken in the dark. That was on her. She knew that. But knowing it did not make what Said was doing acceptable. "I hear you," she said carefully. "I hear you. If you do this, there is no coming back from it. For us. You understand that." Saad said nothing. "I'm going to call you tomorrow," Amina said. "And we're going to talk properly, not like this." She hung up, set the phone on the table, sat in the silence of the apartment for a long moment. Then she stood up, straightened her shoulders, and went back to her presentation. She didn't tell J1. She told herself she could manage it. She called Said the next day, and the day after that. Some calls Said softened, the anger receding, the old friendship surfacing briefly, something almost like an apology forming before it retreated again. Other calls she was harder, more distant, using the information she held like a door she could open at any time. The uncertainty was its own particular torture. never knowing which Sade she would get, never knowing how close the threat actually was to becoming action. She sent more money. She found Sade a contact at a design firm in Lagos through a client connection, someone who could potentially get her an interview. She did everything she could think of from 12 time zones away to address the wound underneath the behavior, and she kept it from Jiwan. This was its own kind of weight. She had become, over 8 months, genuinely bad at keeping things from him. Not because she told him everything, but because he noticed everything. The quality of his attention was precise and unhurried, and she had learned to both value and dread it. He asked once in the kitchen on a Wednesday evening if everything was okay with her family. "Yes," she said. "My father's numbers are good this month." He looked at her for a moment, that look, the one that meant he was filing something away rather than accepting it at face value, and then nodded and went back to what he was doing. She exhaled quietly. One evening, 10 days into the Saad situation, she was on the phone in the study when she heard the front door. Early, he was never home before 7, and it was barely 6. She ended the call faster than was natural, stood up, arranged her expression. He appeared in the study doorway, looked at her, at the phone in her hand, at whatever her face was doing despite her best efforts. "Bad time," he said. "No," she said. "Just a client call that ran long." He held her gaze for one beat longer than necessary. Then, "Dinner in an hour." "I'll start it now," she said. He nodded and disappeared down the hallway, and she stood in the study for a moment with her phone pressed against her chest and breathed. She was running out of room to carry this alone. Sade followed through on a Friday. Not with the merger team. Amina had been watching that angle, had spent 10 days quietly considering what documentation Sade actually had access to and how much damage it could realistically do. What she had not fully accounted for was Jawan's mother. Mrs. Park was a woman of precise instincts and long memory, the kind of mother who had spent 30 years paying close attention to everything that touched her son's life. She received the message. Anonymous, detailed, the name Mrs. Han used correctly, the word contract deployed with surgical accuracy, on a Friday afternoon. She called Jawan that evening. Amina did not know this call happened. She was in the kitchen when he came home, making the lamb stew she had learned to make from a Korean-African cooking channel she had discovered in her first month in Seoul. The apartment smelled warm. She had music playing low. It looked, she thought, like a real home. She turned when she heard him come in and knew immediately that something had changed. He set his bag down. He did not take off his jacket. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not cold, not angry. Something more careful than either of those things. Something that was trying very hard to stay even. "Amina," he said, "I need you to sit down." She turned off the stove, sat down at the kitchen table. He sat across from her, folded his hands, was quiet for a moment in the way he was quiet when he was choosing his words with great care. "My mother called me tonight," he said. She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her. "She received some information," he said, "about our marriage, about how it began." She looked at him, at his hands folded on the table, at the careful containment of his expression, at the specific stillness of a man who had been holding something difficult since a phone call hours ago, and had come home and waited for dinner to be started and music to be playing before he sat down and asked for the truth. That detail alone, the waiting, the patience of it, undid something in her. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "All of it. From the beginning, she did." She did not reach for softening or rearrangement. She did not make herself more sympathetic than the facts allowed or less culpable than she was. She told him about the hospital corridor, the folder with its soft edges, the call from Mrs. Han on an afternoon when she had run entirely out of options. She told him about her father, her siblings, the house. She told him about the calculation she had made and what it had cost her to make it and what she had told herself to make it feel survivable. She told him about Said, all of it, from the first strange text to the calls that went soft and then hard again, to the money she had sent and the contacts she had found and the 10 days she had spent trying to manage it alone. And then, because she had come this far and had nothing left worth protecting, she told him the last thing. "I don't know exactly when it stopped being a contract for me," she said. Her voice was even. She owed him evenness. Somewhere around month 4. Maybe earlier than that, if I'm being honest, which I'm trying to be. She paused. "I know that's not what you signed up for. I know it probably changes things in ways I can't predict, and I'm not telling you because I expect anything from it. I'm telling you because you asked for all of it, and that is part of all of it." She folded her hands on the table, looked at him directly. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Sate sooner," she said. "I thought I could handle it. I was wrong." Che-Wan was quiet for a very long time. The lamb stew sat cooling on the stove. The music she had been playing had ended without her noticing, and the apartment was very still. And outside the window, Seoul continued its enormous, indifferent life. He stood up. "I need some time," he said. His voice was controlled in the way it got when something had landed too deep for immediate processing. To think. "Okay," she said. He looked at her for one moment, something in his expression that she could not read and was too tired to try to, and then he walked down the hallway. She heard the bedroom door close, not slammed, just closed. She sat at the kitchen table alone. She did not move for a long time. She did not sleep. Not properly. Not the deep, restorative kind that required a quiet mind. She lay in the guest room with the lights off and the ceiling above her and listened to the apartment breathe. The distant sound of Seoul beyond the windows, the occasional creak of the building settling, the specific silence of a space that had 2 people in it who were not speaking. She had made peace with a lot of things in her life by sheer force of honesty. The hospital corridor, the contract, the moment she admitted to herself what she felt. She had looked at all of those things directly and named them and carried them. This felt different. This was the first time she had been honest with someone else, and then had to sit in the aftermath without knowing what the aftermath would look like. She found she did not know how to carry that. At some point, the city outside the window shifted from the sounds of late night to the sounds of early morning, the quality of the silence changing, thinning, the first delivery vehicles threading through empty streets. She watched the ceiling get slowly lighter, did not reach for her phone, didn't want to know what time it was or how many hours she'd been lying there cataloging everything she could have done differently. At 6, she got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen window and watched Seoul wake itself up with the particular efficiency of a city that did not believe in slow mornings. At 6:45, she heard his alarm from down the hallway. At 7, she heard the shower, then footsteps, then the sound of his bedroom door, and then his presence in the kitchen doorway, dressed for work, bag over his shoulder, the composed version of him that the world outside this apartment received every morning. He looked at her. She looked at him. "I'll be late tonight," he said. "Okay," she said. He held her gaze for a moment. She could not read it. She had always been able to read him, had prided herself quietly on learning the specific vocabulary of his silences. But this morning he was a closed door, and she did not have the key. He left. She turned back to the window, picked up her coffee, drank it slowly and deliberately, and did not allow herself the small collapse that was waiting just behind her sternum if she gave it any room. She had things to do. She would do them. She called Sade at 9. She had thought about waiting, had considered the various angles, the ways the conversation could go, the things she wanted to say, and the order in which to say them. Then she picked up the phone and dialed because she was done calculating everything, and sometimes the only move was the direct one. Saad picked up on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. "I told him everything," Amina said, no preamble. "Last night. All of it." A long pause. "Amina, I'm not calling to fight," she said. "I'm done fighting about this. I just want to ask you one thing, and I want you to answer it honestly because I think we owe each other that much after everything." Saad was quiet. "Was it worth it?" Amina said. "Whatever you were trying to feel, whatever you thought it would fix, did it work?" The silence that followed was the longest of the conversation. She could hear Said breathing, slow, uneven, the breathing of someone trying to hold something together. "No," Said said finally. Her voice was small in a way Amina had never heard from her, stripped of everything it had been hiding behind for weeks. "No, it didn't." "I know you're hurting," Amina said. "I should have seen how bad it had gotten. I was so focused on managing my own situation that I stopped looking properly at yours, and that's something I have to live with." She paused. "Let that sit. But I can't keep this friendship if this is what it becomes. You know that. I think you've known it since you sent the first message." Said made a sound that was not quite a word. "Get some help," Amina said. Not harshly. "Not from me right now. From someone who can actually be there. You need more than a phone call from someone 12 time zones away. And I think we both know that." She hung up, set the phone face down on the table, sat with the particular silence of a door that had been closed, not slammed, not locked, just closed, gently on something that might one day be reopened but could not be right now. She had loved Saad for 6 years. That did not disappear. But love was not the same as permission, and she had learned that lesson in this apartment over the past 8 months in a completely different context, and it applied here just as cleanly. She picked up her phone again, opened her work files. She had a client presentation at 11, and the client was particular, and the presentation needed to be right. She made it right. If you're still here and feeling everything Amina is feeling right now, hit that like button. You have no idea how much it helps this channel. Now let's see what J1 does next. He did not come home at 7, or 8, or 9. She did not text him. She had decided that in the morning, she would not chase this, would not crowd the space he had asked for with her own anxiety. She'd said everything there was to say. The next move was his, and she would wait for it with whatever dignity she had left. She ate dinner alone, cleaned up, sat on the couch with a book she'd been meaning to finish for 3 weeks and actually finished it, which surprised her. Then she sat in the quiet for a while and let herself think about Kenya. Not Nairobi specifically. Not the hospital corridor or the debt or any of the things that had driven her here. Earlier than that. Her father's laugh before the illness took the ease out of it. Her mother's kitchen on Sunday mornings. The specific quality of afternoon light in the city she had grown up in. Hazy and golden, and entirely unlike Seoul's clean precision. She thought about her siblings, both of whom had texted her this week with the specific imperious entitlement of younger children who had fully absorbed the fact that their school fees were no longer in question. She had found it irritating and deeply comforting in equal measure. She had done what she came here to do. Whatever happened next, whatever Jaewon decided, whatever the apartment looked like in a month or 2 months or 6, her family was okay. Her father was getting better. The house was theirs. Her siblings would finish school. She had walked into an impossible situation and she had navigated it, and the people she loved were safe. She held that. Let it be enough for tonight. At 11:45, she heard the front door. She had moved to the guest room by then, had been lying in the dark for an hour, not sleeping, just waiting in the way you waited when you were too tired to do anything else. She heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard them pause outside the guest room door. A knock. Quiet. The specific knock of someone who was not sure they had the right to make it. "Come in," she said. He opened the door, did not turn the light on, just stood in the doorway with the hallway light behind him and looked at her in the dark for a moment. "I walked for a long time tonight," he said. "I know," she said. "I could tell you needed to." He was quiet. She waited. "I called my mother back," he said, "after I left this morning. I told her the source of the information was not reliable and that our marriage was not her concern." A pause. She pushed back. I told her again. Something moved in Amina's chest. "J1, I'm not finished," he said. Not unkindly, just not finished. She waited. He came into the room then. Sat on the edge of the bed. Not beside her, at the foot of it, at a distance that was respectful and also honest about where they were. He looked at his hands for a moment, then at her. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said. "All of it. The beginning, the contract, the reasons. I want to be clear about something." He paused, chose the next words carefully. "I don't fault you for how this started. We made an agreement and you honored it, and the reasons you came into it were real and human, and I would have done the same thing for my family without a second thought." Another pause. "That part is not what kept me walking tonight." "What kept you walking?" she said quietly. He looked at her. "The other part," he said. "The part you said at the end." She held very still. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And I need the honest answer, not the answer you think I want." "I've been giving you honest answers all night," she said. "I know." Something moved in his expression. "That's why I'm asking." He folded his hands. "When you said it had stopped being a contract for you, was that something you were telling me because the situation was already blown open and it felt like the right thing to add? Or was it something that was true before tonight and would have stayed true, even if Sade had never sent that message?" The question landed exactly as precisely as he had intended it to. She did not reach for a comfortable answer. She thought about the laptop on the kitchen counter and his voice in the car after the dinner and the way she had turned to the window so he couldn't see her face. She thought about the Sunday morning 3 months ago, when she had woken up before him and lain there in the early soul light, thinking she had never in her life felt so dangerously comfortable. "It was true before tonight," she said. "It has been true for a long time." He nodded, slowly. The nod of a man absorbing something he had perhaps been carrying a version of himself. "I should have told you sooner," she said. "I know that." "You were afraid," he said. "Yes." "Of what?" She looked at him in the dark. "That you would remind me what this was," she said. "And that you would be right." Something shifted in his face, subtle, significant. He looked at her for a long moment with the expression she had learned over 8 months to wait for. The one that came after the composure, after the careful processing, after he had taken something all the way down to its truth and decided what to do with it. He stood up. "Get some sleep," he said. "We'll talk properly tomorrow." "J1, tomorrow," he said, firmly but not unkindly. "I'm not going anywhere. I just need one more night." She looked at him. "Okay," she said. He moved to the door, paused with his hand on the frame, looked back at her once, and in the slice of hallway light she could see his face clearly enough to know that whatever he had been walking through tonight had not left him where it found him. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "the contract stopped being a contract for me too. I couldn't tell you when, but it did." He pulled the door closed behind him. She lay in the dark for a long time. She was smiling before she decided to. She slept. Properly, the deep, unguarded kind that required a quiet mind, which she had not expected to have, and which arrived anyway somewhere after midnight like a kindness she hadn't asked for. She woke to gray soul morning light coming through the guest room curtains and lay still for a moment, remembering everything in sequence, and found that the weight of it had shifted overnight into something more manageable. Not resolved. Not finished. But manageable. She got up, showered, put on the kind of clothes she wore when she wanted to feel like herself, not the careful wife of version, just herself. Then she went to the kitchen and started breakfast and didn't think too hard about what the morning would hold. He appeared at 8, also dressed simply. Also, she noticed, without the armor of the work version of himself. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her, and she looked at him, and the apartment held them both in its quiet morning light without demanding anything of either of them. "Sit down," she said. "I made enough for 2. He sat. They ate for a while without speaking. Not uncomfortably, the silence had a different texture from last night. Looser, like something had been released from it. He put his chopsticks down. "I want to say something," he said. "And I want to say it properly, so I need you to let me finish." "Okay," she said. He looked at the table for a moment, then at her. "When Mrs. Hine first approached me about this arrangement," he said, "I told myself it was purely strategic, which it was. I was not looking for anything beyond what the contract described, and I was comfortable with that." A pause. "What I was not prepared for was someone who put a laptop to use the morning after I left it on the counter, who finished a client presentation on the worst night of her marriage, who learned the rhythms of my silence without being asked and never once used them against me." He paused again. "I was not prepared for you. Specifically. I want to be clear about that." She did not look away from him. "I've been trying to figure out," he continued, "when it changed for me. I can't find a single moment. It was too gradual. It was accumulation. Small things adding up until the sum was something I couldn't call by its contract name anymore." He looked at her steadily. "And then, last night, you sat across from me at this table and told me the truth about everything, including the part that cost you the most to say. And I thought, this is the person. This specific person is who I want to be, having difficult conversations with for a very long time." The kitchen was very still. "I know the contract has a timeline," he said. "I know that's what we agreed, and I know you have a life you were building toward on the other side of it. I'm not asking you to abandon that." He paused. "I'm asking if we can build something that doesn't have a timeline. Something real. Something that started badly and honestly, and is therefore probably more solid than most things that start perfectly." She looked at him across the kitchen table. This man she had married for mathematics and stayed for something that had no equation. She thought about the hospital corridor, the folder, the calculation she had made with both hands, open on an afternoon when she had run out of every other option. She thought about how she had stepped onto a plane expecting a transaction and had found, somewhere over the Indian Ocean, and through 8 months of shared dinners and careful silences, and one very long night of truth-telling, something she had not budgeted for. Something that felt, she realized, exactly like home. "You remembered how I take my coffee," she said. He blinked. "What?" "After 2 days," she said. "You never asked again. You just remembered." She paused. "I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself that approximately 40 more times after that." She looked at him. "I was wrong all 40 times." Something shifted in his face, the composed surface of him giving way to something underneath that was warmer and less guarded and entirely real. "So," he said carefully, "is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she said. "It has been a yes for a long time. I just didn't have anywhere to put it." He exhaled, slow, quiet, the exhale of a man who has been holding something without realizing how long he has been holding it. He reached across the table. She met him halfway. They sat like that for a moment, hands on the kitchen table, soul moving outside the window, the apartment warm around them with the smell of breakfast and the particular peace of two people who had arrived somewhere honest. If you watched all the way to the end, thank you. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you never miss a new story, and drop a comment below commenting where you're watching from.